From Buffalo Toronto Public Media and WBFO, this is What's Next Producers Picks, highlights of conversations heard on previous episodes. On today's show,
if me as a parent, I don't know where my baby is missing.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be treated. Sound the alarms. Let's find this child.
Dontaya Davis and Alia Williams from Voice Buffalo. And we close with,
I just knew that when I would paint, I would just go into this zone or this mode of kind of like this Zen mode where I would just be, floating in space, kind of.
visual artist Bree Gilliam. I'm Thomas O'Neill White. Thanks for listening. First, we revisit my conversation with Dontaya Davis and Alia Williams, community organizers for Voice Buffalo. The two are working locally to boost the Ebony Alert system, a new initiative to prioritize missing and exploited Black youth who are disproportionately represented in missing children reports. Can you talk a little bit about missing and exploited children and just kind of what Voice Buffalo is doing?
Yeah, so it had to be about June when I was informed that within 14 days, 14 children, Black children, went missing, right? And I'm a parent. I didn't hear anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, wait a minute. 14 children went missing within 14 days, and it's not all over the news. Like, my phone didn't go off not once. There's no Amber Alerts. So in that moment, we knew we had to do something. So that's kind of what put the battery in our back to really tackle this issue.
What's the difference between being considered missing versus being considered a runaway?
So they say if you're like a teenager, right, and your parent doesn't know where you are, say within 24 hours, it's an automatic assumption that you ran away. Because according to law enforcement, according to what you do here in the media, our babies are running away. That's automatic what they go to without even investigating.
Yes.
Right? You just automatically assume to be a runaway, and that's not true. That's not true. You could be missing. You could have been abducted. You could have been trafficked. No one knows. Just automatic. If you're a Black child, you're considered a runaway.
So the criteria is a bit murky in this situation.
Yeah.
What about updating the criteria for what qualifies as a missing child?
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be working on. Like, we're right in the beginning stages of planning how that looks. But yeah, if me as a parent, I don't know where my baby is missing. Yeah. And that's the way it should be treated. Sound the alarms. Let's find this child. Yeah,
because it could be one of many reasons why they are missing.
Absolutely.
But if you're going to narrow it down to, they ran away, then kind of missing the forest for the trees a little bit.
Yeah. I was told, if they're running away, we don't want to bring national attention to it because say they're running to a space that's safe for them. We don't want them to not be able to go back to that space. That's the excuse, right? And that came from literally law enforcement. But what's the other side of that? Let's say they were abducted. The more we wait, our child is in danger, and it's less likely we'll get them back. So who are we to say right off the bat without knowing anything? We just know a child is not here. They're away, right? Mm-hmm. That they're not a runaway. That they're not a missing child and they're a runaway. Who are we to say that?
So do I have this right though? If a person is considered missing, well, you have to file the report 48 hours.
Yep.
Now, is that the same for if a child runs away?
You know what? When a child runs away, I don't even think you don't have to file anything. That's just the assumption. So the assumption right off the bat is this child is a runaway. Right. There's no filing because if they're a runaway, okay, give them some time, call around the family members.
Yeah, they'll come back.
Yeah.
And normally, in our community, a lot of parents whose children have run away, air quotes, they don't go to the police right away because there's this idea that the police aren't going to take it seriously. So instead, they go through social media as a route to find their child.
Right. Yeah, especially Facebook. Every few months, something will pop up.
Days.
It's
days. Literally every day you're hearing of a child. You're seeing a child's face plastered on social media. the missing children's page. Again, like you said, bury the violence. You're seeing it ourselves though, but you never see it on the news. Some of these children haven't returned home.
Right.
So now we're past runaway, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're missing, and you still don't see it on the news.
And that, has a lot to do with race.
Yeah, it has everything to do with race. There was literally over the summer, okay, we heard about the 14 children in 14 days and then multiple others day by day. And then, to be honest, there was a little white girl who went missing. And I saw it on the news, and I saw it on News 4 and News 7. And then next thing you know, within 2 days, you found her. She was found and reunited with her family. And I was happy.
Right. Yeah. This isn't to say what the news does for white kids is wrong. No, it's not. But it should be equitable.
Yes.
Right.
That's it. And that's what the Ebony Alert is. We're not asking for nothing more. We are asking for the same thing. Sound the alarm. Our child is missing. And then hopefully we can have the same story with the reuniting mom with the child.
Yes, and I want to get into the Ebony Alert system. It was passed in the state of California in October, SB 673, and it authorizes, and I'm just taking this off the internet, authorizes a law enforcement agency to request that an Ebony Alert be activated by the California Highway Patrol if the investigating agency determines that it would be helpful. Similar to the Amber Alert, the Ebony Alert would activate electronic highway signs to alert the public of the missing person. Additionally, SB 673 also encourages television, cable, online, radio, and social media outlets to cooperate with disseminating the information contained in an Ebony Alert. And so now you, as Voice Buffalo, are trying to get a similar type of legislation that California has, trying to get that passed. I mean, would it look similar? Would there be what would be the difference?
So it would actually look very similar to this, right? And the differences is we would want to change like the time frame from when you're considered missing. Like 48 hours is that's a long time. Yes. And I even feel like if a mother doesn't know where her child is, I feel like a whole full 24 hours is a long time. But at least, at most, 24 hours.
At most 24 hours.
24 hours. And then we need to be getting these teams, especially law enforcement, out here looking for that child, and other little stipulations. But that's all in the Ebony Alert too. If there's a mental illness component to it, if we feel like they have been taken or ran away to someone that they can be in harm's way, all of those different things like that is the reason why an Ebony Alert should go out. And
I think we mentioned earlier on the Voice Buffalo website, on your Ebony Alert page, there are faces of a number of missing youth from here to Syracuse. It's shocking and saddening to see those faces, and how long they've been missing, and just all across Western New York to Central New York. And I'm sure from Syracuse to New York City or to Albany, it's going to be the same.
Yeah.
Also on your website are steps to help raise awareness. I mean, we talked about social media, but what other steps can people use to help raise awareness?
So just getting the word out there, like talking amongst parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, we try calling the police, but steps are, if you see something, say something. So like if we saying a child is missing and they're in the area of Bailey Avenue, I feel like, why can't there be a team? I wish we had little like
community teams.
Yes,
to
go out there, and that's literally what Bury the Violence is doing. And shout out to Karima Moore. She's bomb.com. Like, she took it upon herself to go out there and look for these babies. Like, we need to do that. And it's sad that we kind of got to do our own thing, but we got to do our own thing until things like this get passed. But saying something, being out there to support this parent in whatever way is possible. But right now, Like, it seems like that's all we have is social media and our voice, talking about our baby who's missing, giving, description.
Yep.
And what areas to look in, when you last seen them, stuff like that.
And also building more relationship with young people, because oftentimes, like, young person will know and have more information on their friend or their sister, etc., on where they went or if somebody took them, etc., etc. It's just important to build that relationship so that young person feels comfortable coming to an adult and giving information on where their friend counterpart is.
Yeah.
I feel it would also be helpful to, have church is so powerful. Churches and community centers. I mean, those could be places a child could go to, but also a place to get the word out for a missing child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know you don't want to name names, and you don't have to here, but local legislators have shown interest in getting on board with Ebony Alert for the state. How do you get the ball rolling?
So we're in the planning phase right now. So what we're doing is having meetings, discussing things just like we're talking about now, what it looks like for Buffalo, New York, or Western New York, what it looks like, right? What's some next steps? We are reaching out to partners also, church congregations, and community.
Yep.
We want community buy-in, the houses of God. We want our partners all in, because this affects all of us. Like I said, if a baby is missing and not safe, none of us are, right? And so that's where we're at. We're still planning this, seeing what it looks like. We're still hosting meetings with the youth. I don't know if I mentioned that. We've been having listening sessions with the youth and also with parents, right? About what it looks like to be in a world that's safe. How does that feel? We're imagining, right, what it can look like and things that we need to keep them safe. And so we've actually been doing those things, which we plan to keep doing.
Who's involved with these meetings?
So it's our voice team hosting the listening sessions with the youth. And I have had a couple partners. I've had a couple youth pastors come out. And where we just sat in a room and we asked them directly, because again, like I mentioned before, we don't want to go to adults and ask adults what we feel the youth need. We're going right to the source.
Yep.
Hey guys, how is it on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel safe walking down the street? What can we do to fix that? A lot of that you'll see on a talk show. We actually hosted a talk show in November with the youth, and we actually dug deep and talked to them about what they feel like just on a day-to-day basis, going to school, walking outside the house. Me as a parent not even feeling safe, allowing my children to go outside like you could back in the day. So our goal, Voice Buffalo's goal right now, in addition to this Ebony Alert, is to bring back the village. Bring back the village of community where you knew who your neighbors were. They knew you. And if they saw you somewhere you shouldn't be, or saw you and you looked like you were in distress, you knew you can run to Sister Pat's house or Mr. Jim's house down the road for safety. We need to bring that back, because that is something that's lacking in our community right now.
Dontaya, you are the third person that I've interviewed since September to mention that we used to be outside. We used to be outside. We used to, get on our bikes, go wherever. When the street lights came on, it was time to go home. And it doesn't seem to be like that anymore. What's the general feeling you get from talking to the youth about how they feel about their own safety, how they feel about going to and from school? I mean, we've heard lately about a lot of fights after school, some violence within the schools. What was the general feeling you get from the youth about their safety?
Scared. They are totally just fearful of walking down the street. We have a couple of seniors we talked to, and literally walking to school, they talked about men driving in cars, slowing down, trying to get them to come with them. And they're like, wait, I'm just a child. And they're like, so what? So we talked about that. They actually, one of the requests from the talk show was to get cameras at bus stops, and or people that can stand there and make sure they're safe. So they're afraid. They're totally afraid. if you hear that every time you go outside, you as a black men are just disappearing, I think you would be afraid to go outside too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so they're afraid. I know me, I have 2 teenagers and a preteen. They got to think I'm like the most mean mom in the world because they're like, Mom, nothing's going to happen to me. And I'm like, baby, we don't know that.
Right. Right.
So no, you can't go here. Like if they're at the park, I'm across the street in the car. You know, and it's like you got the creepy mom over here, but no, I'm just trying to make sure that my babies are going to come back safe. You know what I'm saying? And so they're afraid. That was the consensus that we heard was fear.
Yeah. The good thing, though, is like even in that fear, they still had solutions. Like they still had wants and needs, and they knew like the problem is here, but like if we do this, life will be better for us. Like a lot of them name things like having, like you said, more guards that care in schools. When we talked about the violence that's happening after school, they talked about wanting more safe spaces for them to go, such as community centers and during after school hours. So they know what they want.
Yeah.
And do we get into this? How does the Ebony Alert differentiate from the Amber Alert?
No, we didn't. First of all, it differentiates because it's specifically for black and brown babies.
Yes.
Which you don't hear about. I think in some of my research, out of was it statewide or the world?
It was national.
Nationally.
Yeah.
40% of the missing persons were people of color.
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to highlight what hasn't been highlighted, which is us, right? When black and brown babies and women go missing, you don't hear about it. That's number one. Number two is it differentiates because the Amber Alert right now is from 17 and younger.
Right.
Those are the stipulations. This is from 12 to 25.
Okay.
Yes, which is a big thing. Also, things like a runaway could be considered missing, and you can have an Ebony Alert, for a child who ran away.
Technically, they are missing.
Yeah.
Technically,
whether they ran away or not, they are missing.
Yeah.
Right. If we don't know where you're at, you know what I'm saying? So so it's things like that. But they seem small, but they're monumental, because before. An Amber Alert is just if there's a car involved, if they feel like you've been kidnapped and they're going to take you over the border or something like that. It's too much, right? And people can get away, and people have gotten away. So this is going to just less of the fluff. You're missing, less sound the alarm, and get people looking for you. Yeah.
Alia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you pretty much said it best.
Yeah.
So what's next for Voice Buffalo generally, and then more specifically the Ebony Alert system? Because you guys, Voice Buffalo does so much. You guys are involved with so much.
Yeah. This upcoming year, we are really planning to work big on youth public safety. Like, this is the year for our children. We're trying to keep them safe. We're seeing that we're in crisis, and we are trying to be a solution to that. So we are trying to do community centers, and you could talk a little bit about what we're trying to have. Because, yes, we have community centers now, right?
Yes.
And something's not working, apparently.
Yeah.
So I'll let Alia explain on that a little bit.
Yeah, so this summer I was lucky enough to be able to supervise an amazing group of summer youth for the county summer youth program. And my main goal in working with them was to mostly see like what changes they wanted to make in community. And through talking to them about a whole bunch of issues that they were affected by, the biggest need we seen was more safe spaces for them. So we came up with the idea of advocating for fully invested in funded community centers with youth programming, and that could include things like tutoring, food pantries, being able to employ our young people in these community centers. And the key is having them open all through like after school hours. So we're talking like from 2 p.m. like to 10 p.m. because that's where we're seeing a lot of the juvenile violence happening in Buffalo. So them being able to be provided with the space to keep them busy, to keep them employed, to keep them fed, to keep them safe, we believe that will decrease gun violence in our community, that will decrease child hunger in our community, unemployment, all the things. We believe having a hub for our young people will increase the quality of life in Buffalo overall.
That was Dontaya Davis and Alia Williams. And we close today's show with Patrick Hoskins' conversation with Bree Gilliam, a visual artist whose portraits and mural work, in her own words, incorporates bold color and expressive brushwork to provoke emotion from her audience.
So one thing I kind of wanted to mention right away, we talked just a little bit about this off air. So you're a relatively recent grad at Buff State. You've been out for 2 years, right? You graduated in 2022. You graduated with the BFA in painting, and you just mentioned you had a minor in art therapy too, right?
Yeah.
But as we just kind of talked about, it's not like that was the culmination of, years and years of painting. It was actually kind of a relatively recent thing. So I'm pretty fascinated by that. So you said you had kind of done other kinds of painting before you began your sort of education in painting, but what really led you to start working with oil paints? Because that's kind of what you're known for now, very bold colors, bold oil-based paint. So what kind of led you to that? I'd love to kind of start there, and we can go in a couple places.
Yeah, so in high school, I started with oil paint my last year, 2018. And I decided to go to college. I was a general art major. I didn't know what I was going to do with art, but my Professor Chang at Buffalo State College, he saw my skills and he said, "You're working very quickly, maybe you should be a painting major." And I was shocked. And I was a little bit scared as well because I never worked in oil. But I decided to just, take a chance, and I did it. And I fell in love with oil painting. I mean, it's most of what I work with now.
And what is it about oils? Is it the kind of vibrancy of it, or?
Yes, definitely the pigment. The pigment is so vibrant, and it's like no other medium, in my opinion. But it's so smooth, and you can just build and build and build, and you can wipe away, and you can do so much with it. It never dries, hardly. I mean, it dries eventually, but it's slow drying, so it's very forgiving, and I love it.
And so the art therapy element of that too, I'm kind of fascinated by that. So as you're, learning how to work with oil paint, really falling in love with it, you're also learning a lot about art therapy and a lot of what that world is like. Where does that come into play? So obviously you have the artistic side of it, but then the therapy part of it is sort of a key piece to it, but it's a little different to just only pursuing painting. So where did that come into play?
Yeah, so basically, I've always, as soon as I've heard of art therapy, I wanted to go into it. I've always found the human mind very interesting. And, I just knew that when I would paint, I would just go into this zone or this mode of kind of like this Zen mode where I would just be, floating in space kind of. And it was the word I learned was cathartic. It's a release of everything that you're thinking about. And it led me to start my own business. It's called Paintphoria. It's a place where people can go to just free paint, and they can splatter all over the canvas, and they can take it home with them at the end.
So when you say I picture, are you laying down like tarps, to catch all that? Is that it requires a lot of?
It requires a lot of preparation, but yeah, it's a startup business, so it's fairly new, and I'm still working out the bits and pieces of the business. But yeah, you lay down tarp and protective flooring and protective things for the walls, and people can just come in and make a mess.
Because people think about that, I would imagine like an artist being in their studio basically doing that. Mm-hmm. So you've essentially done that. You can attest to the positive mental health aspects of that?
Yes. I mean, there are days where I just going through a lot and I just want to decompress, and I just go into my studio and I start painting, even if it's not something I'm going to show at a museum or a gallery, but sometimes I just do it for myself. Even drawing, any medium, every medium, honestly, is productive,
Right. So it's not, because people talked a lot about this during COVID, I remember, of like, creatives during COVID, you don't feel guilty about, okay, you finally have this time now, right? That's like the one thing that you never had before is dedicated time. Now we're all locked down, hunkered down. All you have to do is create, right? Paint, write songs, whatever it is. But some days you don't want to do it. You have nothing left to give. You shouldn't feel guilty about that, right?
Right. I definitely agree with that. Never feel guilty about not creating. I saw this post on Instagram that said creatives are always creating or thinking about creating. That's still a part of the process. You get inspiration from everywhere. So nothing is not working in a way.
Right. It's like rest is part of the larger equation, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned museums, galleries, exhibitions. You've had your work featured in a number of places locally. One of the things I really wanted to ask you about was while you were at Buff State, you had this undergraduate summer research fellowship, right? Where you had 8 portrait paintings that you did of influential individuals in the African American community. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe which 8 you chose and why?
Yes, of course. It was a fellowship project. I did research on these individuals. 4 of the portraits were of people who I felt were victimized, and the other half were people who I felt mostly local, but who I felt were worthy of celebration. Their name doesn't get celebrated enough. So the people were, I believe I did Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Daniel Prude from Rochester, and I believe I did Carrie Horn. And this is in 2021. So, the Black Lives Matter protests were really big. So I just wanted to speak to that time, honor some local people, local heroes. And the other 4, I believe, were Congresswoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes. And at the time, she was president of Buffalo State, President Catherine Conway Turner, and oh man.
I know, I put you on the spot to name all 8. Sorry about that. But, yeah.
Who else did I do? David Driscoll. He's a curator who passed away in 2020, I believe.
So that was the idea from the beginning, was it was always 8. And so then it was up to you to kind of figure out who that 8 was going to be?
Yes. It was a lot during that time. My father passed away during that time.
Oh, wow.
So I initially wanted to do 10. But I decided with everything that was going on, I would do 8. And I still wanted to do it. I didn't want to just not do the project at all. It was an amazing process for me. I learned more about me as an artist and my drive, and not only from the research portion of the project where I had to really look into their lives. It was amazing. I was so proud of myself at the end of it, but I was just so happy I could do something to honor those people because they deserve it.
And this is sort of a thing that always fascinates me in terms of the creative process. So you talk about that research phase when you're researching these different people's lives. Does what you learned during that point influence the way that you end up kind of representing them? I mean, even if maybe you don't know, but maybe you look at the finished work and there's a certain aspect that you read about in their life that, I really wanted to maybe draw attention to this or focus on this in the art?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I'm not conscious of it when I'm actually painting, but then I realize oh, okay, so I drew this person in this area because, for example, Carrie Horn, I painted her with a brick wall on the back. And I was like, wow, she does a lot of street work, where she's working for the community, for the people. And sometimes I selectively choose the background where, for example, a portrait with Daniel Prude, a man from Rochester, I painted a portrait of him. And it was from a photo that I found of him in his mother's kitchen. So I decided to incorporate that. That's the place where he unfortunately passed away. Sometimes it is intentional. Sometimes it's just all in my head, subconscious. So
I was reading, it's sort of to that point, I was reading in your bio, talking about incorporating bold color, expressive brushwork, specifically to provoke emotion. So a lot of that really comes through. And we talked about this before, but working with oil, it's vibrant. Do you want your pieces to be conversation starters? Is that kind of the goal?
100%. That's always my goal, is to start a conversation. No matter the conversation, I'm really big into, being a catalyst for change. And that's the only way you can do that is, by talking about it. I would say being relatable to people's experiences, specifically those who are marginalized. As a Black woman, my perspective is always going to be from the lens of a Black woman. It's just how I choose to use my voice.
And so you've also painted Fred Hampton. You have that available on your website.
Yes.
Are there different considerations given to approaching somebody like that who's, this historical figure long since passed, but a historical figure that's more widely known versus someone more local like Carol Horn or somebody? Do you think about the subjects a little differently? Do you approach the work a little differently?
I try to approach it consistently. So even though people may not know this person or they may know this person, I try to keep it consistent. They're all people at the end of the day. I really try to speak to the humanity of each person. You're not just a figure. You're not just the movement that you are a part of. You're a human being, and I try my best to, illustrate that in all of my work. Yeah.
Some of your work, I hope you're okay with this, but there's a couple of your work specifically that I kind of wanted to get into. So the first one, There Goes the Neighborhood, which was featured at Birchfield Penny last year, I believe, in one of their exhibitions. Can you maybe explain a little bit of what that looks like, what's happening, and then maybe talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, of course. So it's called There Goes the Neighborhood. It's a portrait of a Black family in front of a nice, very nice, wealthy looking house, luxurious looking house. They're on the lawn, and there's, I believe, 2 pit bull dogs, a man with a do-rag on his head, and his perhaps wife, we don't know, but a woman, and their 2 kids. I just wanted to painted that out of frustration. I kept hearing this phrase, "There goes the neighborhood," and for those who don't know, that means when a group of certain people come into a neighborhood, they will bring that neighborhood down, the value of that neighborhood down. And I kind of wanted to just, address that. That's not true, There goes the neighborhood, but there it goes. I wanted to show specifically Black people that they can be wherever they envision themselves, Yeah.
Yeah. It reminded me a little bit of To Pimp a Butterfly,
the
album cover from Kendrick Lamar, which is kind of a similar concept. There's a group of Black people on the White House lawn, and there's sort of this kind of implication that, this is not what we typically see, right? And what might the reactions be of people looking at this, and what might that say about who's actually has a problem with this, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. I definitely want people to take a look if they feel offended, really understand why you're feeling that way. If you feel empowered, understand why you're feeling empowered. And that's really important to me as an artist.
And so, how much of that approach, I guess, comes from studying painting at Buff State and some of the people that you get? Because obviously we think of the technical side, right? And being able to kind of over, the course of your 4 years there, really hone that. And especially remarkable for talking about really getting serious about it in 2018 to then only 3 years later doing these 8 pieces that are, that's very impressive. But how much of that education is technical and how much of it is really about the approach and how, like you just kind of mentioned?
Yeah, I would say it's more focused on the approach. I would definitely say, and I had to, my last year, I had to figure that out on my own, the narrative piece of being an artist and what do you want to say? You have to explore yourself. You have to look within yourself and look within the world and say, what do I want to say? What really helped was research. I was looking at every modern painter from different countries. I just would study, what are they saying and why are they doing it? What does the composition look like? I would look up their interviews. I would look up the bios, and that was a lot of work, but it's worth it. You have to do that as an artist. Always be a student. You're always learning.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So Smeared is another one of your works that I definitely want to talk about. And this one, a little behind the scenes action going on Instagram,
yeah.
Because you actually, if you go to your Instagram, you actually have a video of you basically painting this painting Smeared. So one of your most powerful images, I think, can you maybe describe that one? I think the main sort of image in it is a face, but there's a lot that's kind of also happening in the work. And I was curious, can you maybe describe that one?
Yeah, it's a large painting. It's about 60 by 40. It's almost as tall as me. I think it's taller than me, but it's just a black man. He's the center of the piece. He's the subject. And basically he's screaming out, and it's almost like he's smeared. That's why I named it Smeared. He's kind of being faded into the background. That's how I wanted it to be looked at as. There's a background. It's kind of, it's almost, it resembles like old impressionistic landscape paintings.
Yeah, definitely. It's like rural.
Yeah, very
land.
rural. And that's what I wanted. I just, to talk more about the process, I painted this large figure and I loved it so much. And I said, you know, I had this idea in mind. It's kind of inspired by this painting from 1837, and it's a portrait of an enslaved child that was uncovered. It was an old painting, and somebody was restoring it, and they were wiping down the layers of the painting, and they found a black child.
Wow.
And it happened to be an enslaved child, and that's what the whole painting was inspired by. Just that erasure of history and stories and voices and how that makes the person feel. So I wanted to kind of speak to that little boy who was trapped under that painting for all those years and give him a little escape and bring it to everyone's attention.
And I mean, that one is the kind of thing based on the size and based on kind of what's in the foreground. That's the kind of thing that someone does walk into a room and see it, that their eye, I think, would go there pretty immediately. So I would imagine people have told you similar things.
Yes.
And that was on display, right? Just recently,
Yeah,
one of the local galleries.
Yeah, at Hallwalls Contemporary Art Center, yeah.
Did you have some conversations with people about that, about maybe
Definitely.
the power of it? What are some of do people share how it makes them feel? Do they share that with you?
All the time. One person said, when I walked in and I saw that, I stopped, in my tracks. And I was, wow. They were saying how powerful it was and just how it made them think about what does it mean. And, they wanted to know, what was my thought process. So that meant so much to me as an artist.
And do you ever have any issue with people asking about specifics? I mean, here I'm asking you to do that, but I mean, are there certain works that you'd rather not talk about and just kind of let them speak for themselves?
There's a lot of works that I always say I came to be a painter because I didn't want to talk. I'm very timid and quiet and reserved. And so a lot of people are like, hey, come on this interview. I'm talking now. But I don't have a problem with it. It's just, some things I feel like you have to talk about it, You definitely have to have that conversation. But other works, like you kind of were saying, I just rather let it speak for itself.
Yeah, and that maybe there's something in there too about, your choice of medium and choice of tools, right? Like the fact that you do paint these very bold, vibrant things. It's kind of like, all right, now I've said what I had to say.
Yeah.
Let
Yes.
the painting speak for itself.
Yes.
Very loudly. One also that I love on your website too is Sunshine on My Shoulder. Can you maybe talk about that? It's just one of the loveliest paintings I think I've seen. It's just, there's
Thank you
such,
so much.
it's just, I don't know. Looks to be a father and daughter, and the daughter's young, and there's sort of like the trim of what looks to be like a little child's room maybe in the background. So that was just one that, I mean, I think the title too, like really evocative titles, I think can influence how we receive the paintings. But I love that one in particular. I thought that was very sweet.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a portrait of me and my dad. That was part of my first solo show at Paint the Town. It was dealing with the grief and loss that I felt losing my dad in 2021. It was my first actual show in Buffalo, where people came out. It's a portrait of me and my dad, and I'm kind of resting on his shoulder. It's based off of a real photo that my mom took of us. It was in my childhood home, my childhood bedroom, my nursery room. And I just think it speaks to me and my dad's relationship. We had a lot of fun. We would always laugh and talk and all that stuff. But yeah, Sunshine on My Shoulder, that title came out. He would always sing me that song. That was one of his favorite songs. And it's true. It's near and dear to my heart. It really is. It just represents me and my dad's relationship. And I was so happy that I was able to display it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something so personal, being able to display that for your first solo show. I imagine you feel pride, you feel accomplishment, especially how far you had come in just a few years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And do you still feel that way at anytime you see your work up somewhere?
Every time I see my work up somewhere, I'm just shocked, honestly. I call it imposter syndrome, where I just don't feel, worthy to be in these places, but I'm slowly learning, and I'm giving myself more grace, and I'm learning that I am worthy to be in these spaces, and I'm always honored. Always. No matter how small, large the gallery or museum is, I'm just always honored. It means the world to me.
And so to that end, you mentioned that you were recently joined some other folks from the art world for a panel discussion at the Castellani Art Museum at Niagara University. So I believe the topic was BIPOC perspectives and cultural representation. So, and we talked about this before, but you sort of were sharing this, and you wrote, as an emerging artist, young person, I don't always feel qualified to sit at tables like this, but I'm learning that my perspective matters just as much as everybody else's. So I just think that's an important insight, especially like kind of where you are in your career and trajectory as an artist. As part of that conversation, did you find that the other folks at the table felt similarly, or was that addressed, or where were those commonalities between you and some of the other artists that were at that table?
First of all, they're all giants. They're just doing amazing work in Buffalo. And it was more so that I was honored to be on that panel with them, All of them I respect so much. We talked about it a little bit, and they were like, you're more than qualified, Bree. Like, you have a voice. You should use it. And it was very inspiring, and it helped me learn, yes, my voice is valuable. My perspective as a young person needs to be heard, because a lot of young people don't feel comfortable enough to say what they have to say. They feel like people older than them, know more, or, maybe I'm not educated, or I don't speak fluently enough. But I would really encourage anyone who's dealing with that, just do it. Be scared a little bit. You can have a little anxiety about it, but still do it anyway. It's important.
Yeah, and I mean, right, the only way that you get more comfortable doing it is by doing it, right? And by kind of trusting that voice, yeah.
Yes.
Was there like an audience portion of that?
Yes.
Now so those can kind of go either way, right? Like you're talking about a panel discussion, but I'm curious, having not been there, did you find those were important questions or conversations, or some of that interplay, and like what kinds of lessons, I guess, maybe did you take away from that experience of being on that panel?
Yeah, the people in the audience, the question and answer section was really really great. They asked some great questions. It kind of stumped me a little bit for a second,
really?
Where you really have to think about the answer of what you're going to say, your response. But it was really great.
Because there's always like, kind of to that point, for folks that are used to speaking, or they have a lot of these under their belt, so to speak, they may get asked similar things over and over again, right? So they're kind of used to doing that. Somebody who's new, somebody who's sort of starting out and not necessarily finding your voice, but certainly finding your voice on to be on a panel, it does take a second to be like, how do I feel about this, actually? Yes. And as you said before, it's sort of lifelong student, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's very on the fly, improv. But, if you're speaking genuinely with your answers, and you don't be afraid to be genuine, like, maybe I don't know this topic, but I'm hoping to learn more, or, just being honest with it, answering the questions the best you can, and, authentically. I think it's good. It ended up good. It was really awesome to hear everybody. And I was most shocked because I was like, oh, these people actually want to hear what I have to say. Me, little old me. So it was awesome. Yeah.
So I've always been curious about this too, in terms of like the life of an artist, right? Like, so especially a visual artist. So are you painting every day?
No.
Okay.
There's no way I could possibly do that. I wish I could. That's my dream in life.
That's aspirational for you.
Yes, but I don't think that's realistic. But I try to schedule my day around certain hours, like treat it like a 9 to 5, from 9 to 5, if you're not in the studio, do something geared to preparing a work, or thinking about a work, or brainstorming, or researching. So I try to do that every single day. It's not perfect, but I try.
Yeah. How much have you done commissioned at this point?
I've done quite a few commissions.
Okay.
Locally around Buffalo, I've done small commissions for, people that I know, people that I don't know. I don't really have any larger commissions other than my mural work, from larger organizations. I just did a mural, I did a mural in the summer with Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, that's a commission, I guess. And they commissioned me to do this mural, and I have quite a few commissions around the area.
What was that mural at the Niagara Falls Center?
It was a large mural. It's the largest mural I've ever done. And basically it was freedom because of the Underground Railroad and, the history in Niagara Falls. So I did one under the bridge. It's a large mural. It has a African-American woman figure with a cage over her head. It's kind of, it's different than what I normally do. Little surreal, but there are butterflies in that cage and they're going free and they're kind of moving along the skyline of Niagara Falls. So you see the Niagara Falls and there's a couple who are on a canoe or a boat, and that's based off of a real couple who were escaped slaves and they were escaping to freedom going through Niagara Falls to go to Canada for freedom. So I just wanted to pay homage to those two figures.
So yeah, that's where that research element comes into,
yes.
right?
Yes, definitely. You have to do your research. It just makes it more impactful and more educational too. So some people don't know these stories, so you have to tell them.
And that will do it for Producer's Picks. We would like to thank our guests, Dontaya Davis, Alia Williams, and Bree Gilliam. If you missed anything or you'd like to hear it again, you can get this program as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on the Amplify BTPM app. Each episode is online at WBFO.org. I'm Thomas O'Neill White. Thanks for listening.
This is the Buffalo-Toronto Public Media History Bite, bringing you a peek into significant historical events for the week of April 8th to April 14th. I'm your host, Abby Mylock. April 8th, 1943, we celebrate Michael Bennett's birthday. Bennett is a very well-known choreographer and dancer. He has won various Tony Awards for some of his most known works, some including A Chorus Line, Company, Follies, and many more. Who doesn't love Jell-O, the squishy sweet dessert that satisfies kids and adults' sweet tooth? April 12th is National Eat Your Jell-O Day, so satisfy your sweet tooth with some Jell-O today. On April 14th, 1832, the Buffalo and Erie Railroad Company was incorporated. This helped to create an easier option for transportation for people to get around to different cities during this time. You've been listening to the Buffalo-Toronto Public Media History Bite. Discover more stories about Western New York's past on the Buffalo History Museum's website. Learn more at buffalohistory.org. For Buffalo-Toronto Public Media, I'm Abby Mylock.